help you answer the kinds of questions you have. Fair enough, you won't be able to answer every last little question, and there's a lot to be said for managing a research library in the times of COVID. We've had to really scale back on a lot. We're technically open to the Columbia campus, to affiliates, but we cannot host anybody beyond a Columbia affiliates. This has really stretched our minds and our muscles in terms of how we support people outside of our immediate constituencies. And hopefully what my colleagues will talk about will focus on some of that. So I will turn it now over to Jenny. Thank you very much for your attention. And we can't wait for more information and questions at the end.
All right, thank you, Hannah. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. So thank you, Hannah. Thank you all for being here. Like Hannah said, we're really excited to talk to all of you today about Avery Library. And before I turn over to my colleagues in Drawings and Archives, I want to talk a little bit about the history of Avery's collections and what makes them so special. So Avery was established in 1890 and named for Henry Ogden Avery, who was a young New York architect and a friend of Robert Ware, who was the founder of the Department of Architecture at Columbia. And after his premature death, his parents, Samuel Putnam Avery and Mary Ogden Avery, established the Avery Library as a memorial to their son. So this began with their offering of 2,000 of his personal collection of books on architecture and the decorative arts, as well as original drawings, some additional funds to kind of fill out the collection, and an endowment that would ensure the future growth of the collection. And what you see here on the right, if you've ever seen our beautiful building, in 1912, Avery moved into its present home, which is the McKim-Mead and White building on Columbia's campus, Avery Hall. And Avery Hall also houses the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. So, of course, we've come a long way since beginning with Henry Ogden Avery's 2,000 volumes, his personal collection. And Avery was able to grow steadily, even during World War II. Many libraries had gaps in their collections, but Avery was able to continue to grow. And along the way, the art books in the collection were made into a separate branch. But in the 1970s, the Fine Arts Library, which had again been housed separately, came back to Avery Hall, hence our name, Avery Architectural and Fine Arts Library. And this was after a major expansion of our space, which actually went underground. So if you are in our beautiful historic reading room, as you see here, you'd actually only be seeing a very small fraction of what Avery has to offer, and most of our treasures are on our lower levels. And our research collection consists of over 650,000 volumes and 1,300 periodicals, covering a wide range of subject areas related to the built environment and the fine arts, archaeology, architecture, art history, design, historic preservation, painting, photography, you name it. If it's related to the built environment, Avery's collection covers it, and it's very comprehensive. And these materials cover all time periods, languages, and geographic areas. Now, as Hannah said, the pandemic has very much shaped how we're able to operate at this time and forced us to be very creative in how we serve our patrons. So while my slide says Avery Library today, if you were actually at Avery Library today, we're serving a much smaller group of people at a time, and everyone is masked and spaced out. But this is our beautiful historic reading room. So how do we build such large and diverse research collections? So in addition to the expertise of our Avery librarians, we collaborate with librarians in Columbia's Global Studies Department to collect across all geographic areas and languages. Our holdings, of course, support the curriculum of the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, and the Department of Art History and Archaeology. We also, on an ongoing basis, take recommendations from our users to help shape our collections that they can suggest at any time a new addition to our resources. And we also actively work to collect new formats and modes of scholarly expression. So one way that we do this is with web archives, which are snapshots of websites stored and organized for later use. And this enables us to capture information that may be ephemeral related to the built environment, and our users can find these collections right alongside our books, journals, archival material, and art objects in our library catalog. Now, for many researchers, the Avery Index is an indispensable tool, and this is something put out by Avery Library, and it's a comprehensive listing of journal articles on architecture and design, including the history and practice of architecture, landscape architecture, city planning, historic preservation, and interior design and decoration. The index began in 1934 as a card file and was originally published in print for the first time in 1963. And now, fast forward to 2021, it is searchable through different online database platforms. And at this point, we have over 800,000 records in the Avery Index database. And these cover about 300 current periodicals and about 1,000 retrospective publications on topics related to the built environment. So this is something used by many, many researchers in the built environment and beyond. And so I want to talk a little bit also about some of the collections that make Avery so special beyond just our research collections. And the first is our Avery Drawings and Archives, which I'm not going to talk too much about because Pamela and Shelley are going to talk in great detail, and it's an incredible collection. So I look forward to hearing what they have to say. The next collection I want to talk about is Avery Classics, which is our rare books department. And this is one of the largest architectural rare book collections in the world. It includes about 40,000 printed volumes published over 7 centuries. So as Hannah said, going back many, many years, important holdings of graphic suites, periodicals, manuscripts, broadsides, photographs, and printed ephemera. And the collections of Avery Classics reflect the library's original subject scopes focused on architecture, archaeology, urbanism, and the decorative arts. Some of the notable collections in Classics are the Trade Catalog Collection, which is one of the largest collections of catalogs of American building trades anywhere, and the American View Book Collection, which includes books, pamphlets, and brochures that document cities, towns, and buildings throughout the United States. And our third special collection is art properties. If you've ever been on Columbia's campus, you've likely actually seen some of our art properties. And this collection comprises more than 13,000 works of art in all media, reflecting nearly all cultures and time periods. And researchers may make appointments to view and study most works from the collection with advance notice. And the artworks are displayed in selective locations on each campus and in our storage. Some of the highlights of this amazing collection include public outdoor sculpture, including Rodin and Daniel Chester French, among others, paintings, including the largest repository of paintings by Florine Stettheimer, photographs ranging from daguerreotypes to digital prints, over 2,500 ancient Near Eastern and Asian artworks, works on paper, and sculptures and decorative arts. So this collection presents a really great opportunity for our students to use art objects for research, for teaching, and curating exhibitions. So it's a really amazing collection. And now that you've been properly introduced to Avery, I'm going to pass it on to Shelley and Pamela.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone. I'm Pamela Casey. I'm the architecture archivist at Drawings and Archives. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you all see that? I hope so. So I'm going to give you an overview of Avery Drawings and Archives, which is where the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation archives are held at Avery. And I'll talk a little bit about what we do and who we are. And Shelley will then give you a history of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation archives. And we'll talk about the various collections within the archives. And then I'll go over some of the resources we have for you as homeowners that we've worked on over the years and prepared. So we have our online collection page, our finding aids for various parts of the collection that are open for research, and a new online digital collection of study images for the drawings. And then Shelley will give a live demo. So if you were going to do some research on your specific building, she'll show you the kind of step-by-step, the steps to do that research using the tools we have. And then we'll talk a little bit about what our current services are, because as Hannah mentioned, we do have there are still some ongoing pandemic restrictions to our current services here at Avery. So Drawings and Archives is the department, as Jenny mentioned, we're one of Avery's 3 special collections. We're an architectural archive, and our focus is on, well, we document architecture and design practices, and our collection strengths are really 19th and 20th century New York City and American architecture. These are just some of the highlights of our collection, some of the different creators represented in our archives. Louis Sullivan, the Guastavino Company, Eli Jacques Kahn, Alexander Jackson Davis, Hugh Ferris, Philip Johnson, Gordon Bunshaft, Max Bond, Felix Candela, and Harrison and Abramovitz. And then in 2012, Drawings and Archives acquired the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation archives in partnership with the Museum of Modern Art. So the MoMA takes care of the architectural models. So that's they basically acquired the architectural models and architectural fragments. It's about 65 objects or so. And then the vast remainder of the collection is here at Avery at Drawings and Archives at Columbia. And Shelley will go over the various parts of the collection that make up the archive, but all of the public services for the archive are really handled here at Avery. And MoMA is, meanwhile, commits to exhibiting Wright, having Wright on exhibit on an annual basis. So this is, if you were able to visit us right now, this is the entrance to the archive, which is down in the basement at Avery. So these are our public services. We offer a lot of public services, obviously, and our goal really is to connect users to our collections. So as archivists, we process collections and we create various tools, finding aids, guides, inventories that we make available to researchers who then visit us to do research on site. We support a very diverse research community. We have students who visit us, scholars, architects, historic preservationists, exhibition curators, and of course, homeowners of Wright buildings, but also buildings all over New York City and other cities. So typically we would have on-site research appointments for the public. We would do classes in the archive, and we offer instruction sessions on how to do archival research. We have digitization services, imaging services, and we have an active loan program. So I'm going to hand it over to Shelley, and Shelley's going to kind of give you an overview of the history of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation archives and the collections here.
Great. Thank you, Pamela. I'm Shelley Hayray, and thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm going to speak briefly to you about the history of the archives, starting with the creation of the archives during Wright's lifetime, and then later the history of the archives after Wright's death in 1959. So starting right at the beginning, Wright opened his practice in Chicago in 1893, and this early period of Wright's professional life from 1893 to 1925 was punctuated by various moves and 2 destructive fires. These live events had a tremendous impact on the makeup of Wright's archives. For example, only about 1,100 letters survived from this period, which for context is only 1% of Wright's total correspondence in the archives. Interestingly, Wright disagreed that his archive was impacted by these early life events. Wright's mythic version of the Taliesin fire sees the flames stopping at the doorway of the drafting studio each time, sparing his drawings. Or, as he is quoted in Kenneth Frampton's introduction to Wright's collected writings, saying, "It was as if God questioned my character, but not my work." We know this story is not entirely true, as many early drawings found in the archive are visibly charred. One of those examples is on the screen right now. However, this myth underscores Wright's own understanding of his archive, that his drawings were a body of work in themselves. It is for this reason, as historian and curator Nicholas Olsberg argues, that Wright established the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation in 1940 to serve primarily as a repository for his collection of drawings. So, Pamela, next slide. After Wright's death, the idea of his archive expanded to include his papers and writings. And further, it was not until after the death of Olga Lloyd Wright in 1985 that the archive was refigured into a more traditional archival repository with the creation of vaults. And it was this period that saw the beginning of systematic inventorying of the collection, the inventory that we at Avery still benefit from. It was also in this period of the late 80s, early 90s that the foundation began working with selected scholars and institutions to create various printed resources and indexes of its collections. From this period onward, the general public was able to access the archive through microfiche surrogates of drawings and correspondence held at the Getty Institute and through various foundation-produced publications of its holdings. The collection was then acquired by Columbia University's Avery Library and the Museum of Modern Art in 2012. The physical transfer of the archives began in 2013 and was completed in 2016. The first portion of the archives that we opened up to the public was architectural drawings and correspondence collections. Since then, we have been continually opening up different collections within this vast archive, and currently about 90% of the archives is fully inventoried and open to the public, of course, minus current COVID restrictions, which we will speak to later. I would just like to recognize the work of our colleagues at Taliesin West, in particular, Bruce Brooks Pfeiffer, Marco Stipe, Oscar Munoz, and Indira Bergstrom, whose work and stewardship created the strong foundation for the work that we have done at Avery. So Pamela, next slide. So at Avery, we think of these collections, the archive, in sort of two sections. And so the archive is a really massive archive. It's very vast. And we think of it in these two groups, which is this core collection and then the sort of secondary creator collections. And the core collection really represents Wright's work and life. And so it really predates his death in 1959. And this is where you would find the collections that you would really think of when you think of Frank Lloyd Wright, and particularly as a homeowner, what you would be really interested in. These include, of course, the architectural drawings collection, which is about approximately 30,000 drawings arranged by project, the books and publications by Wright, his correspondence, which is over 100,000 letters, exhibition files, fellowship talks, which includes both recordings and transcripts. And we have relatively recently digitized the recordings. Films, which have also been digitized relatively recently. These films include both interviews and lectures given by Wright, some films about projects, primarily for promotional material, and some home videos, particularly of events on Taliesin's campuses. There's a very significant manuscript collection. Wright was a prolific writer and a prolific re-editor of his own work. And this is a really dense collection with lots of his really interesting insights into Wright and his philosophy on architecture. There's two very large photograph collections, which we have divided into one collection of personal and Taliesin fellowship photographs. This is where you're going to find portraits of Wright or Olga Lloyd Wright, some family photos, and then a lot of photographs of life at Taliesin, including festivals such as Easter, brunches, and lots of performance and dance photographs. Then there's project photographs, which would be of interest to many of you. Not every project has photographs, and not every project has all the different types of photographs one would find, including construction photographs, photographs of the final product, photographs for publication, interior photographs. And then finally, there are some family papers and ephemera. This is currently being processed, and we hope to have this material open in the near future. So next slide, thanks. Then there are these secondary collections, which are also very significant, particularly in terms of sort of scholarly research into the fellowship. So the biggest One of the biggest is probably Olga Lloyd Wright's papers and also her recordings. Then there is a sort of smaller collection for Lloyd Wright's papers, primarily documenting performances and her work choreographing dances. There's a very significant oral history collection. These oral histories were primarily conducted by Indira at the foundation in the 90s and the 2000s. There are transcripts as well as audio and video recordings, which we're having digitized currently. There's a small collection for Eugene Masslink's work outside of projects, so really documenting his beautiful design work. A very small collection on Wes Peters' papers. And then there's a very significant collection for the Tallius and Associated Architects that is as big, if not bigger, than Wright's holdings for drawings and project records. This is, of course, documenting the firm that was established after Wright's death. And then there are other smaller collections that aren't currently open, but we're always here to answer questions about. And I'll pass it back to you, Pamela.
Thanks, Shelley. So I'm going to, sorry, I wasn't able to turn my camera off, but I'm going to go over a few of the resources that we've created that we think will be helpful, particularly to homeowners as they're doing their research on their homes. So we're going to show you our online collection page, the kind of main landing page for the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation archives. And then we're going to show you the various finding aids and explain what those are and how you can go through them. And Shelley will give you a demo. These are the kind of guides, inventories we create for the various parts of the collections. And then we're going to show you this new online digital collection of black and white study images of the drawings. So these are 3 really good resources for homeowners when you're doing your research. So first, and this presentation will be shared with you. There are all these links. I've included links. We've included links everywhere, so you should be able to just open them directly from the presentation. But this is the landing page for the Wright archival collections. It provides an overview of all the different parts of the collection. We've organized it in kind of 3 different areas. The main part is the collections that are open for research. Then there are the collections that are still in process, so they're closed for processing for the most part. And then we also have a link to related archival holdings here at Avery, because even before the Foundation archives arrived, we had significant holdings related to Frank Lloyd Wright here in Drawings and Archives, including previous donations of Wright material, a collection of Louis Sullivan drawings that were gifted to Wright, that Wright then gifted to Avery Library, and the Edgar J. Kaufman papers on falling water. So there were really a lot of archival collections here related to Frank Lloyd Wright, so which made us a very good home, I think, for the Foundation archives. So from the collection page, you'll be able to read a brief description of what the collection contains and access finding aids for the collections that are now open for research. I've just pulled out a few. We've basically identified collections that we think will be of primary interest to homeowners when you're doing your research. There's the architectural drawings collection, correspondence, the project photographs, as Shelley pointed out, and the specifications. So the drawings, project photographs, and specifications are organized largely by project number, and I'll explain what that means when I show you a finding aid. And then correspondence is organized by the correspondent. But mainly we see these 3 collections these 4 collections, sorry, as being very relevant to your research because it's fairly easy to look for material related to certain projects. For instance, although the correspondence is not arranged by project, it is a very rich part of the collection in terms of showing the correspondence that Wright had with many of his clients related to certain projects, but also his ideas, the back and forth that he would have had with the clients, because the specifications are not always that robust, let's say, or they don't exist for every project. So often the correspondence can really fill in some gaps. So first, what is a finding aid? This is a very archival term, but these are the tools that archivists create when we process collections And these are the finding aids are the tools that we create for researchers. They're essentially maps to the collection, a kind of guide that describes the contents of collections. They help researchers identify if material exists and where it's located within a collection. So this is the summary page for the architectural drawings collection in the archive. And you'll see there are many different things you can kind of click through and read. There's a summary page. This is the summary page, and it also explains how we've arranged the collection, how it's organized. The drawings and the project photographs are arranged by decade and then by project. And then a good search tip is that when you arrive to this landing page for the summary page for the finding aid, if you click on View All, which is this under Container List on the left-hand side, it'll expand all of the series. So then you can just start keyword searching across the whole finding aid. So if you just do Control F and then type in the project name or the project number, you can kind of tab through and see get to it very quickly. So the architectural drawings finding aid, as I said, it's organized by decade and then by project number. And then I've just expanded here one of the series so you can see what type of information that you'll have. So you have the project number, the name, obviously, and then you get a number, you get a sense of how many drawings exist in the archive here at Avery. Sometimes it's very possible that other drawings did exist that didn't. I mean, the vast majority of the archive was transferred, but drawings were, at some point maybe lost or sold, or and so these are the drawings that exist here at Avery. And then we also have a link here, the blue link. It says View Available Black and White Study Images, and this takes you to this new online collection in Art Store that we've created at Avery. So just to explain what that is, essentially in the 1990s, the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation partnered with the Getty Research Center and to photograph the entire architectural drawings collection in black and white. This collection of black and white study images was also transferred to Avery when the archive came here. And we've now made this collection of study images available online on the Art Store website. So as I explained, you can access these images directly from the finding aid, and there'll be the link to each project's images will be under the project name, or there's an online. I've included the link here to the Art Store collection page. I find it a little bit easier to go through it from the finding aid because navigating it on Art Store to find specifically your project can be a little tricky. But from the finding aid, there are really two different ways you can get to these images. And I've included two drawings here just to show you the difference, because the study images they're in black and white. So they're not an exact representation of the drawings in the collection, but they're really an excellent resource for study purposes. So on the top here, you see a perspective drawing for falling water. This is the image of the drawing that is in the archive here. And underneath it, you can see the study image in black and white. So I'm going to hand it back to Shelley, and who's going to do a demo and go through the steps of what you would need to do your research.
Great, thank you so much, Pamela. So really just sort of synthesizing everything Pamela just said, there are sort of 4 steps that you need to take when you're starting your research. And just really to reiterate, except for the black and white study images where you can click through and actually see items that are represented in the archive, for the most part, what you're going to find using our resources is just an indication of what material exists on site. And so you would be required still to either come on site when our pandemic restrictions have been lifted, or starting an imaging order again when our pandemic restrictions have been lifted. But really the first step I would suggest everyone do is go to our Frank Lloyd Wright collection page, which is where we have, like Pamela said, the list of the collections that make up this archive. And then when you're on that page, you will see a link that said project list spreadsheet. And I will show you all this in a second. You'll want to download this. And what you really need to do is find your project number. And these project numbers were created by the foundation, I believe in the 80s. So Wright did not create project numbers for his projects, unlike many firms that you would see in practice, but they were created later. The project number primarily is based off of the year that the design was started. So for Guggenheim, the number is 4305. So the design began in 1943, but as we all know, the building didn't open until 1959. But that number 4305 is the number you need to sort of navigate to identify all the material related to the Guggenheim. Then when you're on this collection page, you will see there's two sections. There's open for research and then in process. You'll want to start really with the open for research because that is the material that you would be able to have access to on site. And then finally, you'll navigate through the finding with this project number to identify how much material exists. So I'm going to share my screen now and try to do a live demo. So give me a second. So unfortunately, my computer is not allowing me to share. Pamela, would you mind? And maybe I can talk through.
Sure.
Okay, sorry.
No, let me.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I think maybe. Okay, did that work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, crisis averted. So what you're going to do is you want to land on this Wright archival collection page, which is what we call sort of our Frank Lloyd Wright landing page. There's another way to find it. So if you Google Avery Architectural Library, you come to our homepage. You can go down here, highlights. Highlights absolutely is our Frank Lloyd Wright collection. So you can click on that. And then you will get sort of a summary about the history of the collection at Avery. And what you'll want to click on is this collections, where it lists all the collections that make up the Frank Lloyd Wright archives. So I'm going to click on that. And then you'll see there's this open for research, which includes, all the collections that we were talking about. And then there's, of course, this in process that includes collections that we're actively sort of inventorying, trying to make available online. So what you want to do is, if you are not familiar with the collection, but you have a project in mind, you want to find your project number. And what you can do is download this project list. So I'm going to share what that looks like. So I just clicked on that. It'll open up in Excel if you have Excel or some other spreadsheet software. So let me share that. Okay. So what you'll see here is that project number list, what the name of the project is, the client, the work type, house, office building, location, and then date. So this is a really helpful resource in the sense of you can sort. So let's say I know the client name, or I want to look at, we want to see all the Chicago projects. So I can sort here. And now it's alphabetical by location. And I can start here and I can see, oh, there's a lot of Chicago projects. And then, I could resort to find all the houses in Chicago, et cetera. And then you'll also see a really helpful description in the title. It will say unbuilt if the project was never built. If it does not say unbuilt, it was indeed a built project. So for today, for the demo, I'm going to search out two projects. First, I'm going to look for an early project, and then I'm going to do a later project. So for my early project, I'm going to Control F and find the Dorothy Turkle house. So I'm going to put in Turkle. And there we go. There is an entry. That project number is 5513. So I'm going to write that down. So when I look through my finding aids, I'm going to look for the Dorothy Turkle house using the number 5513. I'm also going to, for reference, look up the Thomas Hardy house. So I'm going to search Hardy, and that project number is 0506. So those are the two numbers that I'm going to use as I navigate through these finding aids. So I'm going to go back to my collection overview page. And I'm going to really, I want to look at the drawings first. I want to see what is available for drawings. So here we have a collection record and online finding aid. The collection record is in our catalog. And it's sort of where students primarily find references for our collections, and then they can book an appointment. You can skip that step because you already know that that collection exists, and I would go straight to this finding aid. So click on the online finding aid. And when we have finding aids, we have two terms for our finding aid. We have a front matter and a container list. The front matter is sort of the narrative of the collection, and it describes sort of the collection as a whole. And then there's this container list, which you see here, and that's really the inventory, and that's where you identify specifically what makes up this collection. So here you can find sort of using the collection, some really general information, but what we're really looking for here is what material exists for the two projects we're interested in today. So I can go for the Dorothy Turkle, I can go straight to the 1950s because the project is 5513. So it is a project that began in 1955. So here I see all my projects. I'm going to go all the way down to 5513. And there's a lot of projects in the 1950s, so this will take a bit. Great. So here we go. I see that there are 16 drawings in this archive, which is great. The really exciting thing about this finding aid is I can actually view what these 16 drawings look like online. This is not the case with the rest of our archive. It will just indicate what exists, and you will have to reach out to us to identify ways to view that material. And primarily ways to view that material typically is for on-site access. But for this, I'm going to click through and look at these 16 drawings. So here we go. I'm on Art Store. These are the 16 drawings for the Dorothy Turkle house. And I'm going to click on this specific drawing, and I can zoom in. I can look at all the details. This specific drawing is drawing 1513.13. And that's a really helpful number if you're citing. So for a citation, if you're ever going to use this in a publication, that would be your citation number. And there is the credit line. There's a description of this drawing. The object title is working drawing number 8. And I just want to say, for the most part, the object titles were done by our colleagues at Tallius and West. And so that is work that we really inherited from our colleagues at the foundation. You'll see we're not able to download this item. So this digital collection is maintained by our colleagues in our Avery imaging department. So if you have additional questions during the Q&A, I'll let Hannah Bennett, our director, speak more to this project. So I'm going to go back to this finding aid. I'm going to go back to our main page. I'm going to do view all just so you can see. It lists all the projects. And now I'm going to see what we have for Thomas Hardy House. So I'm going to Control F. Oh, I don't know how I must have already typed in Hardy, but it showed up, but 0506, there we go. It says we have 36 drawings in this collection. I'm going to click in. So this is a great example where the study images are not necessarily showing all the drawings that we have in our collection. So you can see we have 31 study images for a collection that has 36 drawings. You can always reach out to us and we can identify for here the 5 drawings that do not have a study image. For the most part, they tended to be maybe a blueprint that was uncatalogued and is a blueprint copy of an original drawing that is here. But we can always verify that if you see a discrepancy here. And again, you can click through and really view what these drawings look like. And so this is a really exciting resource, and I hope that you all can spend lots of time looking at these really interesting drawings. And to get to the main page for this digital collection, I'm going to click here on this collection. And my personal preference into this digital collection is through the Finding Aid, so it shows us by the project. But there's also a really interesting search you can do at the collection level here on ArtStore. So let's say you're interested in rug design. As you can see from our Finding Aid, it doesn't describe rug design, so it doesn't describe the sheet level or the drawing level description, but all the drawings are described and available. That description is here in ArtStore. So I'm going to highlight search within results, and I'm going to type in rug and see what drawings exist for rugs. Rug. So here we go. I have 97 drawings that have some term rug in them. And so for the most part, I'm hoping that these are all rug designs. And this is a rug and furniture design for the Ward McCarthy house. Let's say I know that rug design was there was a big rug design for the Hoffman house. So let's type in, I'm going to search within results and add Hoffman. And then I found 4 drawings for rugs for the Max Hoffman house. And then I can go back to our Finding Aid and click on project 5707 to find the full extent of drawings for this project. So that is primarily how you would navigate through the drawings collection. And let me go back. Sorry. I clicked through a lot of things. Okay. So armed with these 2 project numbers, I want to see what else exists in this archive for these two projects I'm interested in. So I'm going to skip over correspondence for a second and go down to project photographs. So I'm hoping that there are project photographs for these 2 projects that I'm interested in. Again, I'm going to go straight to the Finding Aid right here. I'm going to do view all, and I'm going to Control F and try 0506, which is our Thomas Hardy number. And it says that we have 50 photographic items. As you can see here, there's unfortunately not a link to a fabulous digital collection of black and white study images. So this is where you would need to work with us when we are back open to the public for booking an appointment to view this material or starting an imaging order to have these imaged for you. And then I'm going to look up Dorothy Turkle, 5513. And this project has 67 photographs. So I've been really lucky. These 2 projects that I'm interested in have quite a few photographs. There are item level descriptions of these photographs. We don't have that currently available, that description available online, but case by case, we can help you with that if you're really interested in sort of seeing exactly what material exists for, or what photographs exist for these projects. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to see if there are specifications for the 2 projects I'm interested in. So going online, I'm going to do view all again. I'm going to do Control F and put in 0506. So I got no hits. So you can see there are some specifications for early projects, these 05. So this is the 1900s, but there wasn't any for the Thomas Hardy house. That's pretty common for specifications in the early part of his career. They don't always have, for the most part, there isn't that many specs that you can find. But let's see, maybe I'll be more lucky with my Dorothy Turkle search. I'm going to do 5513. And I've been quite lucky. I have 2 booklets, one that is 47 pages and one that is 134 pages. So again, I don't know exactly here what those specs are detailing, but you can always reach out to us and we can tell you those are specs for lighting or for plumbing or whatever they may be. And I hope to eventually have that sort of description available, but right now we just wanted to put as much information out there quickly so that you can at least know that there is material, and then we will continually probably expand and add description to make these searches more in depth. So you can please always check back on this page and in our finding aids for more information, because we do update. And then I'm going to go now to the correspondence. So this is sort of the 4 collections that I would really recommend you look at in terms of researching projects. So you can't use your project number here, but you can use your client name. So I have Dorothy Turkle and Thomas Hardy. So I'm going to download this inventory right now. Give me a second. And I'm going to share. Sorry, let me open this up. I'm sorry, I'm on my Mac today and I'm not a good Mac user. Let's see. Pamela, would you be able to jump on and do a search for me?
Yes, let me just open it up.
Okay. So again, you're going to want to, so I'm going to want to look up Turkle and Hardy. And just as another reminder, primarily the early projects. So correspondence from the 20s and earlier, very little survived, and it only represents 1% of the collection. So I'm thinking for my Thomas Hardy 0506, I'm not going to find much. So Pamela, do you want to look up Hardy Thomas?
Hardy Thomas.
Thomas, yes. And then find all.
Maybe I'll do find all, yeah.
Yeah. So I have hits, which is great, but I'm looking at the date here. And the date says 1930. So we know 0506 is the project. So the original design began in 1905. So it looks like if you click on a few more, that most of this correspondence is from the 30s onward. And so it's not going to represent sort of that client relationship at the time of the design. That is really what I expected, because this is one of the early projects and very little remains for correspondence in terms of documenting those early relationships. But let's put in Dorothy Turkle. So if you want to put in Turkle, comma Dorothy. So I have quite a lot here, and the dates on this, 55. That's a good sign because our project number is 5513. So the design began in 1955. It looks like there is communication between Dorothy Turkle and Wright and Eugene Masslink and others, likely regarding the design. So as you can see here, there is a fiche ID row. That's because we service our course. We have the physical correspondence. So we have boxes and boxes of original letters, but like the drawings that were digitized by the Getty, so too was the correspondence, and it was microfiched. So we have a microfiche reader, and we use these numbers to go through and view the images for the correspondence. And it actually makes it much quicker and easier to navigate through many letters than it would to go box by box. And that is sort of the overview of the 4 collections that I would really recommend you do a deep dive in as a homeowner or someone at a site to identify what material exists for your project. So I'm going to pass it back to Pamela to talk about some of the restrictions that are currently enforced because of the pandemic.
And great, thanks, Shelley. So as I mentioned earlier, typically pre-COVID, our services would be different, and we would have on-site, we'd have researchers from outside the Columbia community visiting us for appointments, research appointments. We'd be doing classes in the archives. We have our imaging services. Imaging, we use this interchangeably with digitization. So there would be exhibition loans, and we obviously would be doing the research support over email and in person the way that we typically do. Since September, so since the beginning of the academic year when we opened again, Columbia made the difficult decision to restrict access to the libraries to affiliates only, so enrolled students, faculty, and staff. So that has meant that our research, we still are doing research appointments. We've had a lot of students. We do have a lot of members of the Columbia community who do research in our collections, so we have been open to them. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to be open to the rest of to our public, to our user base or researchers outside the Columbia community. So we don't know when this will change, but I've included here, I mean, you can always reach out to us for updates. At the moment, these restrictions are in place for at least through the rest of the academic year. In addition to limitations for appointments, our digital imaging services are closed, meaning no new digitization is currently possible. So again, for updates to this service, or any questions related to imaging requests or to that online art store collection that we showed you, you're free to reach out to our colleagues in Avery Imaging or to us here in Drawings and Archives. So I just wanted to give you a recap. Again, we will be sharing this presentation, so you'll have all of these links. But to learn, again, just to go over what Shelley explained in her demo, to learn what the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation Archives holds related to your building, we invite you to consult our collections landing page. You can download the project list to know the project number for your building. And then you consult the various finding aids. You can consult various finding aids for parts of the collection that are open for research to learn what relevant material exists to your building in the archive. You can see online black and white study images of drawings related to that are in the archive. And you can access these images either through the architectural drawings finding aid, which is you can access from the collections landing page, or directly through ArtStore. For updates on changes to appointment policies at the archives, you can visit our webpage. We'll be updating it regularly if and when things change, or you can always reach out to us over email. And email is always easier than phone, so it's just easier for us to keep track of our communication with our patrons if you send us an email. For updates on changes to our digitization services or questions about the art store or study images, you can visit the Avery Digital Imaging webpage or email that department directly. And the email addresses are both here. So that's it. Thank you so much for having us. And I include again our email addresses here for various departments we've talked about. We hope that this has been helpful. We have met some of you before. I think some of you have been able to come for a tour at the archive, and I know that we've spoken with many of you over the phone or over email, and so we're here to answer questions where we are able to help you over email. So please do reach out to us, and we hope that this has been useful. I'm going to hand it back to John.
I've learned a lot, and I've been working with the archive for several years. So, I think the point that you're always adding to these facilities and things like that is really well taken, because there's always new things that people can access online, as well as really being able to do a lot of homework before they come to the archive, so that they're very knowledgeable about what you have and can sort of quickly reference the various projects and correspondence and all that sort of thing. It's really, really pretty amazing. Just to reiterate, this presentation and the links that they've been sharing will be shared with all attendees shortly in the next day or so. So don't worry if you didn't catch everything in this presentation. You'll have opportunity to review it. We do have some good questions that I'd like to ask. One question that we get fairly often is a number of homeowners have drawings that have descended through the house or their family members or things like that, and they're interested in the best place for those to go. Does the Avery take on additional, or you sort of have everything you handle right now so that that's not so plausible? So anybody want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. Obviously, we have the entire archives from the foundation represented on Avery's in our library, and so things that you know we it's case by case really. And while we would love to take in everything, we have to be a little choosy and make sure that we're enhancing what we've already got and not taking away from other special collections that might specialize in, you know, other areas of Frank Lloyd Wright beyond what we do. So that's just to say that, you know, while I can't, and, you know, I welcome my colleagues to jump in on this, we can't blanketly say, yes, we would love to take in everything. We do have to be choosy and make sure that what we're accepting is not just a something that's reinforcing our own collection, but that is doing justice to the thing that we're accepting. So yeah, it's kind of case by case, but I open it up to my colleagues who've dealt with this a little bit more than certainly I have.
Yes, exactly. I, you know, always feel free to reach out to us and we can evaluate the fit at Avery, but we are a collecting archive and we collect lots of collections outside of Frank Lloyd Wright. So there's always a lot of judgments that have to be sort of considered every year for what we can take in, but you're always free to reach out to us.
Great. And we had a question, and I sort of had a similar question in my own mind in terms of the projects that either straddle Wright's death or projects that were TAA, Taliesin Associate Architects, or even more so were independent architects who did additions to Wright buildings, apprentices, I should specify, apprentices that did additions to Wright buildings, either TAA or independent apprentices. I'll let you sort of weed out, but to what degree does the collection cover those?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. So our Taliesin Associated Architects archive is very large, but it was a selection. So our former curator, Janet Parks, who I know many of you know, curated out specific projects, but it was a very generous amount of collection. So it is well documented. That firm is really well documented. I believe she acquired every project that was started during Wright and then finished with TAA. So you would have to look likely in both archives to sort of get the full pictures of both the Frank Lloyd Wright architectural collection and the TAA collection. As you'll see there, the TAA collection on our collection page, it is open, but there is no finding aid like there is a finding aid for the architectural drawings for Wright. That is just, that is, you know, a month or two away. But, you know, I say this, but then lots of things get in the way, but please always feel free to write to us to see if there are projects related or drawings related to your project in TAA. But soon you will have a finding aid, so you'll be able to identify that material on your own. And then in terms of projects done by other apprentices outside of the TAA, for the most part, no, we do not have those. For example, Alden Dow has his own archive in Midland, Michigan, and sometimes these collections do exist elsewhere. You can always reach out to us or the foundation. Likely one of us can probably point you in the direction of an archive if we know of its existence. But for the most part, no, we are really for additions done by the firm itself, so not by apprentices who left.
Great. And we have a question about the Getty in terms of its facilities around correspondence and drawings and how that interacts with your collection.
I'll jump in and then I'll let Pamela, I think she has more up-to-date information. I do occasionally still point people to the Getty for correspondence because I do believe they are still servicing the correspondence, but Pamela, maybe you have more information.
We're actually meeting with them later this week, so I don't have the information yet, but yes, I know that they do service the microfiche just as we do. In drawings, I'm not familiar with what they're doing in terms of whether they're sharing the study images or we're sort of having a meeting to touch base this week.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that they have surrogates of originals that they're servicing, and you know, how they do that is kind of beyond our understanding, apart from, you know, what they'll share with us. But you know, they're one of a handful, if not another second library that has the fiched version of the correspondence and access to the photographs, the black and white images. But that's kind of the extent of what we understand they're doing right now. But you know, we're going to talk to them later this week, so we'll find out more.
Quick question in terms of the best person to reach out to in terms of photographs. Is that Shelley?
In terms of new digitization requests or the photograph collection?
I am not certain which.
So for the photograph collection, actually, that would be Pamela. She processes the photograph collections. And then in terms of digitization, that would be our colleagues who aren't on this call with us, but in Avery Imaging.
There were a couple of comments about some of the links people were having difficulty with. So we'll clarify that when we send out the follow-up email if anyone's having some difficulties with the links that are being provided. Just running through our questions very quickly here. There was a question about a curator of the Frank Lloyd Wright site getting access to the Avery index, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the Avery index because it's a really massive thing that's really helpful, and how people access that.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for that question. I'm always happy to plug the Avery Index, which is kind of the seminal resource in architectural periodical literature, as Jenny was saying in her presentation earlier. It is a subscription-based resource. It's not free. And I know many people have access to it through, you know, if they're affiliated with a university or a college library, it's available that way. Certain public library systems, certain public library systems also provide access to it. You know, I'm most familiar with Chicago Public Library, and I'm pretty sure that they have access. Same with Oak Park, but obviously we represent much more than the Midwest and in that particular area. But yeah, it's a really important resource, and you can find, I don't know, I'm going to let Jenny say, because she actually did a little research into how many records we actually have in the index pertaining to Frank Lloyd Wright. Jenny, what did your findings come up with?
Ooh, I think it was about 3,500 records. I was going to say, don't quote me, I'm being recorded, but it was about 3,500 records.
Yeah. So it's a really important resource that covers, at this point, almost primary source material, which is to say things published in the late 19th, early 20th century, as well as, you know, yesterday. But, you know, it's not like a Google kind of thing. It's subscription based. But, you know, I encourage everyone to reach out to their local librarian who will help sort of facilitate access to that kind of resource.
Still muted. I think I have caught everyone's question. There are a couple of questions that I'm saving that are more technical relating that I'm going to save and I'll follow up. But otherwise, I think we have everything. This has been great. As I say, I've learned a lot, and if people do have a chance to go to the Avery, it's just a fascinating experience all by itself. And when they talk about things being down in the basement, boy, it doesn't feel like that. It's a really wonderful environment to look at things. So with that, thank you so much for your work. And I believe Indira and Margot were on our attendee list. So if they're here, thank you so much for your work in preparing these objects for the Avery to take on. And with that, I'll call it a day. And thanks so much.